All right. Now we're talking. Now we have some more terms. Skip that stone. Vertical, horizontal, and diagonal integration. Now opinions vary on this stuff. I've given you all three, but I'm going to give you two different versions of this. Now, according to this guy, Stephen, he argues with regard to business. I'm going to say with regard to media, since it's the context of the textbook. Vertical growth involves expanding either forward into succeeding stages or backward into preceding stages in the supply chain. Brad, what are you talking about? Okay, let's imagine that you're a newspaper company. Okay, you produce newspapers. Vertical integration would mean that you got involved not just in the newspapers on their own, but in every stage of the production and distribution of those newspapers. Notice the skillful way that I've woven media into this conversation. All right, so in addition to just newspapers, you might get involved in everything from growing trees to pulping them to producing ink to printing the actual newspapers, and then beyond the production of the newspapers themselves, you'd also get involved in the distribution and sale of those newspapers. Okay, everything from go to woe, basically, getting involved vertically in the production and distribution process. Now, I'm going to defer to Stephen's model of things here. He says horizontal growth occurs when two firms at the same stage in the supply chain or who are engaged in the same activity combine forces. Okay, so companies getting bigger, and then goes on to say, by eating other companies, and then goes on to say that diagonal expansion occurs when firms diversify into new business areas, thereby forming cross-media entities. Oh, they're talking about media companies too. Okay, I've got to tell you, and I've been dealing with this stuff for a while now, this is the only place, I've given you all three definitions there, but this is the only place where I've ever come across the diagonal one before. And generally, in my experience, there is no diagonal one, and the definition of horizontal is that which has been given as the diagonal one, and the horizontal one's just skipped. So, that's all. So, you know, up to you what you choose. I would say, personally, I'm more of the opinion that horizontal expansion occurs when firms diversify into new business areas, thereby forming cross-media entities. Now, I've got one thing to add. With regard to media, again, I'd like to suggest to you that this idea of horizontal or diagonal integration, call it what you will, I don't really care, is kind of redundant, because today, let's look at that newspaper company again. What newspaper? Hang on, back half a step. This horizontal or diagonal integration might involve the newspaper company stepping sideways and getting involved in online companies or buying a TV station or something like that. Okay? But the reason I'd say that it's kind of redundant in this day and age is that what newspaper doesn't publish online these days? Like, it's kind of, you know, or include TV video clips that you then see on the nightly news as part and parcel of their day-to-day activities. It's just kind of all rolled in together now anyway. So, I don't know, we'll wait and see if these terms still have any currency in the next few years. Okay. Now, all of these ideas, media theories, hegemony, westernisation, where are we all going? Vertical and horizontal integration, everything getting rolled into one. What's happening to the world? It kind of begs the question of the end point. Where are we going? What are we doing? Well, we have choices. Some would argue that that through technological advance, people without my particular cynical bent on the world would say that we're heading towards utopia, which is an ideal imagining of a perfect world. Might it ever be possible? It's a rhetorical question for those of you who are not familiar with them. Or, alternatively, dystopia, which is the other side of the coin. Perfect world on the one hand, perfect chaos on the other. Which is it going to be? The answer, of course, is in all likelihood neither one. The answer, of course, probably lies somewhere in between. Skip that stone. Okay, more media stuff. Things happening in the world. Citizen journalism is another topic covered in communication, new media and everyday life. Citizen journalism can be described as the increasing availability of new technology, not least its decreasing cost, along with corresponding reductions in size, has seen the rise of what's called citizen journalists. Okay? People with cameras on their phones. Not a particularly new phenomenon, but a rapidly growing phenomenon. The first photographs of the tsunami the Asian tsunami in 2004, and I think it was 2004, somewhere thereabouts. Pretty sure it was Boxing Day 2004. And the London bombings a couple of years later. The first photographs that were reported came from citizens, people that had been there on the ground and happened to have cameras on their phones. Okay? And increasingly with technology, we don't need people to traipse around the world cutting cameras and camera crews indeed behind them. One-man shows, and everything they need fits in a backpack, if not indeed in their pockets. So citizen journalists are changing the way that the news is broadcast. This is having some interesting effects. Insofar as we're becoming more accepting of amateur footage on the grounds that it's more genuine. Okay, we can say, oh wow, look, this is rough as guts, but it was done by somebody that was taken by somebody right on the spot that was actually there. Okay, we're also with satellite technology and so on and so forth, the capacity of ordinary people to publish through blogs, through indie websites and so on is more widespread than ever before, and we're getting new avenues for people to get their stories out there. So citizen journalism doing its little bit to change the world. The digital divide. Kawamoto. The digital divide is the gap separating those who have access to new technologies from those who do not. Now, there are various kinds. Help me out. Digital divide was originally Castells. Thought so. Thank you. It's the gap separating those who have access to new technologies from those who do not. This gap may be geographical. Okay, there are some places in the world, in the third world, where there is no internet access. Okay, there are also some places in remote Australia where there's no internet access. Socioeconomic. There are people who cannot afford the technology, can't afford the link up, or can't even afford the computers. And you don't need to go very far for that. There are pockets of that right here in Melbourne. Or even generational. Okay? My grandmother gets the internet, gets in that she understands it, wants no truck with it, but she gets it. It's just, yeah, not for me, thanks. Different versions of the digital divide. Skip that stone again. Habermas and the public sphere. The public sphere. I'm going to skip right to the end here. I should have put this first. Simply put, the public sphere is an ideal conception of a level playing field. Jürgen Habermas put forward this idea that, at least ideally, a conception of a place where everybody could come together without fear of reprisal and express their point of view on whatever the issue of the day happened to be. Now, various elements associated with this were suggested. Places like coffee houses, pubs, as well as medium like newspapers or books, and now the internet might be a place where the public sphere might be facilitated. Public sphere by Habermas's definition. Civil society is based on the concept of the public sphere. We can foster public debates, articulate problems, acquire information, and through this level playing field, people would kind of serve to regulate one another, and a watchdog role would ensue. Now, in his later work, Habermas actually backed away from the idea of the public sphere and said, hey, look guys, it's a great idea, but you're never going to get there because it's just not possible. Which I actually buy, because even if you put a bunch of equal people, or equal to all intents and purposes, on a level surface, give them a topic to discuss, people rise to the top, dominant characters emerge. Okay? I've had debates in tutorials. Is this classroom a public sphere? No, because I have a degree of control. I being the teacher in this instance. You get the idea. So the public sphere is a great thing to aim for, a great thing to aspire to. Just don't expect to ever actually get there.